And hello, everybody. I am Jim Freund. This is what I like to call often a pop-up episode of Hour of the Wolf. We planned this pretty much only in the last 10 days or so, and we're pre-recording. Today is Saturday, uh, the 26th, August 26th of the year 23, or fourth year of the plague, depending on how you want to look at it. And when I say it's 5:06, that's East Coast. And our guest, Arley Sorg, is on the West Coast. So let's actually get right down to it. Arley Sorg is, let me make, yeah, we'll see him in person in a moment. So we don't need those pictures there. And in fact, better to bring him up. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi there. And while people can see you, and we're doing this on YouTube and Facebook,
Nice.
so you can put this video on your page on Facebook.
Cool.
So, I don't believe it. We have 3 people viewing.
It's okay.
No announcements made. I don't have a big following, but yeah. Hi, folks. Arley Sorg is an associate agent at KT Literary. He is a 2-time World Fantasy Award finalist and a 2-time Locus Award finalist for his work as co-editor-in-chief at Fantasy Magazine, which very sadly will be putting out its final issue for the second time in September. Its first time, I think it was about 10 years ago, Fantasy Magazine had a different crew and wasn't run by John Joseph Adams as it is now. And Arley, along with Christy Yant, has done yeoman work, got a number of nominations for stories. And this is something also that I've seen Neil Clark writing about, that it's hard to get the smaller magazines onto Amazon. I don't know why. I don't know what that's about. Maybe we'll do a show. But in the meantime, that's affecting the bottom line. So hopefully it will come back, or hopefully we will see Arley as a co-editor-in-chief or editor-in-chief at some other publication or website. Arley is also a Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Solstice Award recipient. What is the Solstice Award?
It's for doing cool stuff with the community.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Sifwa gave it to me. I think Butler got one, Neil Clark got one, bunch of cool people got one. So it's for just
Butler got it posthumously, but horrible.
It's just for like cool being involved, having a cool impact, a positive impact, that kind of thing.
Yeah. A Space Cowboy Award recipient and a finalist for 2 Ignite Awards. If you're going to Google Ignite, spell it Ignyte. He is senior editor at Locus, associate editor at both Lightspeed and Nightmare. By the way, by way of complete disclosure, I work for Lightspeed magazine. I'm the audio editor for all the Adamant Press magazines, which are Fantasy, Lightspeed, and Nightmare, but I am the host of the Lightspeed podcast. He is a columnist for the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. So you people that watched us with Cherie Renee Thomas last month should you should read FNSF anyway. He is an interviewer for Clark's World, which again is a great venue. He is a book and film reviewer. Arley is a guest. That's why I do radio. A guest critiquer for the current Odyssey workshop and the week 5 instructor for the 2023 Clarion West workshop, which is a big deal as far as I am concerned. Find him online at arleysorg.com. Arley is Arley, Sorg, Sorg. And his Twitter, I don't think Twitter, it's X Twitter, Facebook, or Blue Sky. How is Blue Sky?
It's all right so far.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
I haven't been there, or Mastodon. I do too much social media just with Facebook and ourwolf.com, which is, if anybody wants to see what a website from 1995 looks like, visit ourwolf.com. It's very retro, not for any reason other than I haven't touched it. And above all that, it doesn't really mention, it implies your bio, but doesn't mention what you write. Do you have a preferred genre?
I mean, I write science fiction, fantasy, and horror, speculative stuff. I write things that are like, usually have some sort of subtext around identity, community, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I haven't been focusing on writing in quite a while. So
yeah, although I saw a story of yours appear in the last few months somewhere.
No.
Maybe, well, maybe I just noticed it.
That is possible. I haven't tried to sell anything in a really long time. So
yeah.
And
it's hard enough. At least my partner got into FNSF, which was a thrill. And since I used to work a lot with Cherie, I've sort of been not pushing that. Cherie I also run the New York Review of Science Fiction readings, and I can't say I conned Cherie into running that for 2 years. And she is, I think, one of the most important, wonderful people in the genre now. And I should, this is mostly for Arley. I think my regular listeners know that when I say science fiction, I mean the whole series, all the genres that Arley just mentioned.
Yeah.
And there's an old definition that is attributed to Damon Knight, although I don't know if that's accurate, but he said, science fiction is what I'm pointing at. And yeah, that works for me. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a whole range there. You've been co-editor of Fantasy Magazine. Was that a choice that, fantasy is my favorite, or is it just that that's what was available at the time?
No, and even it was like I had been thinking about running a magazine for a while and getting into that side of things, and I had maybe 3 or 4 different ideas about how to make that happen, and I went after a couple of them, and the other ideas were not strictly fantasy. One was like dark SFF, another is like more horror, and then I had a more broadly speculative magazine idea in mind that I just never tried to make happen. And so the original thing that I was going to do, I spoke to the publishers about taking over their magazine, and they were on board. So it was pretty much lined up to happen. But then drama went down, and those people are no longer really part of the speculative community.
Ooh.
So that never happened.
That's the wrong direction, folks.
Yeah. So, but I almost was a sole editor-in-chief of a different magazine, which would have been like just general speculative with dark leanings, basically.
Yeah.
And then Christy and I are friends. We've been friends for a while, and so we had just been on a video call to catch up, not to do any kind of business, just to hang out. And it was, the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so we just started
For me,
talking
it's
about,
been longer. She used to live in New York, and I used to see her at least twice a month at either the KGB Fantastic Fiction reading series, uh,
okay,
which is the evil competition to my New York Review of Science Fiction readings. The evil people there being Ellen Datlow and Matt Kressel. Used to be
yeah,
Captain Grant and uh, oh, how can I blank on Gavin's wife's name? Brilliant writer.
Kelly Link.
Thank you. I
Hmm.
don't know why. Same initials. The name Karen Lord, who should be editing something, but it was Karen Lord's name that came into my head. I think I saw she's recently on the cover of Locus.
Yes, we just interviewed her a couple
Yes,
months ago. Hmm.
she's a brilliant interview.
Yeah, and Karen was also an instructor at Clarion West
Right.
just this year with me.
Right.
Yeah.
I inherited this radio show because of Clarion West, which is to
Nice.
say, Margot Adler created Hour of the Wolf, and I was her co-host 2 out of the 5 days of the week. We both applied for Clarion, the very first Clarion West, 1971, and she could afford to go. I could not. She said, well, if I go, you get to take over Hour of the Wolf for those 6 weeks. And it's like, oh boy. And she came back. And after just a few months, she got an evening prime time slot. And I inherited this show. And uh, I'm still here
Nice.
somehow 51 years later.
Nice. Yeah. But that's how the fantasy magazine thing happened. Christy and I had a conversation and everything fell into place.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get into Locus?
That was,
And that's your day job, right?
yes, it's my day job full time here in Oakland. Uh, pretty much everything I do is about just timing and luck and saying yes to stuff, for better or for worse. And so Locust was the same thing. I had friends that I had met through local conventions,
Mhm.
and I went to Odyssey back in 2014. While I was at Odyssey, a spot opened up at Locust, and a friend of mine was friends with Tim Pratt, who works at Locust, who I had hung out with a couple times. So Tim had a vague idea about me. We had hung out a little bit, and my friend was like, "Oh, this position opened up," and I was like, I actually didn't know what Locust was, had never heard of it really, never looked at it. And my friend was like, "All right, if you're interested, there's a job." And I was like, I guess. So things just fell into place. So
Yeah,
it was 100% just who I knew, the timing, and how everything lined up.
yeah, that was good. If I seem distracted for a moment, I don't know why, but for those watching their radios, my image has frozen. And, well, it's all radio to me. So that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Not really. Uh, so that's all good. What brought you into the genres to begin with?
Well, I've always loved, like, for me, it's weird that we even distinguish genre as genre because I grew up just watching all kinds of stuff, reading all kinds of stuff. I grew up never necessarily thinking of one storytelling mode as markedly different from another.
Mhm.
Like I saw all kinds of genre movies in the theaters when I was a kid. I was reading really thick Robin Hood books and mythology books when I was a kid, and that led into like more genre reading. But I also read just, mimetic fiction or quote mainstream or whatever. And to me, it's all just stories. But I do love, the imaginative. I love being able to think of weird stuff and uh, just fantastic places, fantastic ideas. So I do think in a lot of ways, genre gives you more room to imagine just different things. But in terms of the heart of what story is, I don't really personally draw much distinction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always, for me, it's just always been there. There's never a moment of like, oh, this is the day. It's just always been part of my life.
Yeah. Same here, with some adventure stuff included, books that appeal to genre people, even though technically it's not like The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. I don't know how many people remember that one today. Although I heard rumor of a movie, but that's sadly because uh, you can make a franchise out of it.
Yeah.
And
For adventure, I grew up on those Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies, and Doctor Who, Tom Baker Doctor Who,
yes,
kind of adventure, sort of,
yeah, yeah. That was my first Doctor, but I am older than you, so by the time Doctor Who was on, I was in my 20s or something like that. Uh, uh, but Tom Baker, well, yeah, you'll never forget your first. And Tom Baker was my first Doctor, and therefore my favorite. I don't know if he'll have any involvement in the upcoming 60th anniversary, but he did show up for the 50th anniversary in a lovely cameo.
Yeah.
Although my favorite part of the 50th anniversary was the Five-ish Doctors. If you've ever seen that, it's sort of a something Georgia Tennant, who is Mrs. David Tennant, who is daughter of somebody named Moffat. It gets, who was the fifth Doctor. It gets very confusing. So, but I'm looking forward to that. What are your current favorite things in genre on in media, television, movies, radio?
Well, there's some really cool movies recently. I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once was absolutely wonderful.
Genius.
I mean, we review films. Me and my friend Josh Pierce review movies at Locus.
Right.
We also really liked Talk to Me, which was a low budget Australian horror movie, which did a lot of really cool things. So I think on the one hand, there's a lot of really generic cookie cutter rehash stuff going on, especially in major Hollywood motion pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But I think where the exciting stuff is often in the lower budget, lots of heart, really interesting ideas, really interesting storytelling kind of projects. And I think that we're seeing a couple of things happen here and there along those lines in terms of movies. In terms of TV, it's really exciting because, special effects has gotten to where we had always wanted them to be. So, you have Foundation, you have Wheel of Time, you have Invasion, you have all kinds of really interesting genre-based shows spanning a spectrum, from harder SF to harder fantasy to more core fantasy. And everything in between across so many different platforms, from cheesy to really well acted, well written, and well produced. And so I think,
And sometimes low budget. One of my current favorite shows is Reservation Dogs,
yeah, that's a really cool show.
which is genre.
Yes, it is genre for sure. Yeah, But there's so much cool stuff. You could almost flip a dial and find different things. And I think one of the really exciting things is that we have greater access to international works, both in terms of books, in terms of film, in terms of TV. And I think genre, in quotes now, on the international scene has been around a lot longer than we think. But I think that what's cool is for us to be able to see more of it, and to be able to engage with more of it than we used to.
Yeah, people have to get over, now we can't do it on radio, but people have to get over the idea of not liking subtitles.
I 100%.
I've never had a problem with subtitles. To me, it's always, and even when a movie is or TV shows on in English, I tend to keep on the closed caption.
Yeah.
I just like I like that second level of the information coming in. Although I watched a recent mentioning Reservation Dogs, I watched an episode of season 3 recently called Dear Lady, and I totally missed in the very beginning, as they show it, that one of the people is a spirit and not a human. It was very subtly done and utterly brilliant.
Nice. I also like What We Do in the Shadows.
I same producer or co-producer on that, but Taiki Waititi.
Yeah.
And that's fun. I liked the original movie, and I enjoy the TV show, but occasionally I think they get repetitive. It is, when you get down to it, a sitcom.
Yes, it is.
And it obeys some of the old sitcom rules. Reservation Dogs is supposed to be a sitcom, and it's not. Some of it can be very dramatic.
Yeah. Although What We Do in the Shadows does have, it does obey a lot of the sitcom boundaries, but it allows for more transformation than sitcoms usually allow.
Yes.
I don't want to do any spoilers, but there are some actual changes that happen with the core cast over time.
Right. It progresses.
Yeah.
And also sometimes some of the changes last for one season only, and next season things are back to
normal.
Back to what passes for normal.
Yeah.
And because normal is not a word one would usually apply to that particular show. And I know I should have a list in front of me, but there have been some great things. People were talking about the shows that were coming out during the pandemic as being premiere television, and then, as some people claim, the pandemic is winding down, which I don't believe for a moment. There are 2 new variants out there, and they're coming to New York, where I am. So they're advising masks again, not mandating. Politicians won't allow that. Doctors mandate it. So why am I bringing that up? Oh, yes. With the end of the pandemic, there's still, and despite 2 strikes that have Hollywood at a standstill, we're still seeing some supremely good television. And this from, when I was a kid, the television was the 60s. And you can compare it to that.
Yeah.
And I would not have known. So about the huge difference. And I just got a note slipped to me under the transom saying October is the final issue. of Fantasy Magazine. I
Yeah.
don't know why I thought it was September. I guess I read the memo too quickly.
Well, it's funny because the cover you have up is the October cover.
Is it? Okay.
Or
It's
no,
just,
that's
no,
the
no, this is,
September issue. That's the September cover. No,
yeah, yeah,
but yeah, October is the final issue.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that cover, but uh, the cover I have up online, that is the September issue. And whoops, bringing up too many things. Oh, and I already put the August issue to the side digitally, but hopefully the majority of people are looking at this on the radio. But you can go to your preferred website and watch. We are, by the way, I should mention, on Facebook in the Hour of the Wolf group, and we'll have copied it. I'll have copied it to my timeline, and I hope Arley will copy this to his. And we're on YouTube, which I'm sort of building these into a channel. We were recording the New York Review of Science Fiction readings via camera and microphone for about the last 9 years, including one for it's longer than that because we did Samuel R. Delaney's 75th birthday, which would have been, actually, it's about 7 years ago. And whoa, we had to lock the doors. Legal limit there is 150. We had well over 200 people before we locked the door. And damn it, Delaney deserves it. So I'm a fan. I guess part of the answer to who are your favorite writers is people should look at the magazines you edit and the reviews you come out with. But how does collaborating with another editor work? I know how it works for different people with writing, but both you and Christy Yant are the editors of this run, hopefully not the last run, of Fantasy Magazine.
Yeah. And Christy is also a publisher. She is, part of the Adamant Press publishing. It's her and John. So really, another way to look at it is Christy is allowing me to have some creative license in her property, which is really kind of her. But, John has nothing to do at all with any of the creative content. It was purely me and Christy. And, how we did it really varied issue to issue. There are stories in there that are more me. There are stories in there that are more her. We learned to respect each other's tastes and choices.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a huge amount of mutual respect to begin with anyway, which I think really helps. But, it also helps when maybe something doesn't land as hard for me as it does for her, or vice versa. So if we feel really strongly about something, it really helps to have that mutual respect and trust, and to say, even though this isn't necessarily one of my stories, this is an Arley story. Even though this isn't one of my stories, this is a Christy story, and I can trust in her taste and that she knows what she's doing, and vice versa. And she did a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that I don't really mess with. So another way to look at it is I am one of two acquisitions editors, and we didn't use any slush readers. So we're reading all the slush ourselves, making all the decisions ourselves. But when it comes to the production side, it's 100% her and a couple of other people who help behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't deal with any of the production, but I do.
You have enough things to do at once, as is.
Yeah, she does too. She has other stuff that she works on too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we both have full-time day jobs and other obligations, and the ins and outs of life that everybody has. But yeah, collaboration was great. And it's really good to, if you do collaborate, it's good to do that with somebody that you just like and that you respect, because otherwise problems can come up. But yeah, it's really good to work on this with somebody and to feel like it represents both of us, but to also feel like it represents me at the same time, which is really weird. It's hard to explain how that works, but fantasy is so much me, but it is also so much both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. As person who pays hyper attention to every story, since I'm the audio editor, means I'm paying attention to every word that is uttered by the narrator. And
Yeah.
by the way, there's some great narrators there, not to mention an incredible host, Janina Edwards, who will continue. I'm at Lightspeed Magazine. She will also be at Lightspeed Magazine.
Yeah.
And she's always been a reader for us. But as I was saying, I pay hyper attention to the stories on a word by word, breath by breath basis. And I cannot say, oh, this one was editor A and this was editor B. It's the
Yeah.
it's the writers that matter.
Yeah.
Except for reviews and the other stuff that's in the magazine.
Yeah. Well, we don't have any reviews. We have interviews and essays and poetry. I don't think you guys did any of the poetry. I think you guys only did the longer pieces, but we also publish flash. So we have flash fiction. Every issue would be 2 short stories, 2 flash pieces, and 2 poems, plus an essay or an interview.
I think, yeah. I think we did flash on one podcast.
Yeah.
And the podcasts are half of the longer stories, which is there are 4 stories a month, and we podcast 2 a month. So, and I don't even know who chooses. Is it Stefan Rudnicki of Skyboat Media, who runs the podcast end, or is it you and Christy? Is it John? I have no idea.
No, I don't have anything to do with. I have like absolutely zero to do with the podcast side at all.
Yeah, my guess it's between John and Stefan together talking about it. So
I would guess Christy has a lot to do with it too.
Oh, okay.
Because she's one of the publishers.
Yeah.
So, and John doesn't really do much with fantasy, except like the ads and stuff like that. And he might have helped with production. I don't know. I don't know what the behind the scenes looks like. I always just trusted them to do their thing. They never needed me to get involved in it. So they handled all of that, which is really lucky for me.
Yeah. Well, and we can just point out to people that it used to be John Joseph Adams Press. Now it's Adamant Press, Adamant being at Adams and Yant smushed together.
Yep.
So it's the 2 of them.
Yep. And Christy is a true powerhouse. She is creative. She has a lot of fiction in her own right, which has received all sorts of acclaim. Mm-hmm. She is an acquiring editor for Tor.com. She's edited lots of other cool stuff and, had awards acclaim and great reviews and all kinds of stuff. So Christy, in my opinion, is one of those people who is woefully under-recognized for all the stuff that she does and for her talents and skills and her work.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what your next chapter is?
Well, I just started as an agent. So that's the next chapter.
Okay.
And so I'm looking for clients. I've been reading queries. I've been meeting people at conventions, taking pitches. I've also been teaching a lot. I've taught, I don't know how many classes over the past couple of years, a lot, for all kinds of people. And probably I would say culminating in being the week 5 instructor at Clarion West, which was for me a huge honor. And
Yeah.
So I think, hopefully I'll continue teaching because I do enjoy it. And I have a couple things lined up already. So like I have an Apex class coming up. I may have something else, I can't remember. But the agent thing is going to be the main thing in terms of I'm no longer co-editing fantasy magazines. So a lot of that time and energy is going to go into agenting, looking for clients, and once I have clients, doing my very best to advocate for them and to help them to develop their careers, which, is in a lot of ways using skills that I've already been using over the past 5 to 10 years anyways. So for me, in some senses, it's a natural extension of things I've been doing for a while. Hi, Boba. My cat's here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just dealing with something on the public chat channel. So
no worries.
So it's which wouldn't matter if this wasn't primarily radio. But it's neat to see that we have a number of people watching.
Cool.
And hopefully many more listening on Monday. For those who are watching this on YouTube or Facebook, this broadcast will be this Monday, the 28th, at 9 p.m. New York time or 6 p.m. Arley time. And so that's where people can rehear this. Oh, and it gets archived in both places. And the interview we're doing here online is going to run about an hour. The radio show is 55 minutes. And that includes intro music, outro music, a movie review by Dan Persons, cool mug.
Jason sent it to me for teaching a class.
Ooh. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, Clarion especially, that it has changed so many lives. It's, I think, when certain people are looking for who's going to be a lawyer, they look for Harvard. And when you're and actors, you look for certain studios where people have studied, like the Actors Studio or whatever. But when you're looking for a new voice in speculative fiction, I think Clarion, it's not the place, but it's a primary place. It says this person has been through the mill. Because depending on the teacher, when Margot Adler took it, the teachers were Delaney, Joanna Russ, Kate Wilhelm, Damon Knight were together, and Harlan Ellison. And Ellison could be real tough on students, tough love kind of teacher. And he did it well. So what do you focus on when you teach?
It depends on the class, but at the end of the day, my main goal is to empower writers to learn more on their own and to develop themselves as writers in whatever direction they want. Because I think, so much of the old school teaching methods ended up crushing writers a lot of times. And I think that a lot of times teaching can be about the teacher's ego more than it is about developing the student or the writer. And so, my main purpose is really to empower people, because I think that there's no one person who holds truth with a capital T in their hand. No one has, the ultimate writing style, which is right for everybody. No one has the ultimate writing advice, which works for every single person. We all have things that work for some people and that don't work for other people. And so I think it's really important to empower people to learn on their own, to seek their own truths, to figure out how to develop whatever it is that they ultimately want to do. Even if it's not exactly what I see or what I would want to do or what fits the things that I envision. Everybody has to do their own thing. And so empowering people is my ultimate goal with all the classes that I teach. Beyond that, it really depends on the class and what the class is about and the methodology. I've taught all kinds of stuff, from different craft elements to, I even did one on networking and meeting people at conventions and events. So it just really depends.
Yeah.
And it also depends on the people that you're teaching, because, you can get one room of people that has a set of needs, and then you can get another room of people and you're teaching a similar topic, but that other room of people might be in a very different place and have a different set of needs. So part of it is also, I think, engaging with people, figuring out where they're at and what they need to know, and trying to meet them where they are.
What were the first things that empowered you?
I think confidence has a lot to do with it. But I went to Odyssey and I had my mind blown, because I thought I knew a lot. And I think that this is something that happens with writers. I think that writers often think they know a lot. They read a lot, they spend years writing on their own or with friends or with small groups or whatever. And, I think that oftentimes they think that they know more than they do. And then you go somewhere like Odyssey, and Odyssey just rips the skull off the top of your head and goes, what you know is this much. And there's all this other stuff to learn about and to practice and to see and to try and experiment and to see if it's right for you. Because again, nothing is going to be right for everybody. But knowing a technique, knowing a tool, knowing that this is an option, all of those are the kind of things that you can learn through different classes, through meeting people or whatever. So I think that can be empowering. Just learning more tools, learning how to learn, and having confidence in going out there and doing stuff. Because I think that at the end of the day, it's insecurity that leads us to cling to the idea that we already know something and we don't need to learn. We've got it. We're fine. We're good. But really, there's always more to learn. There's always more to see, and there's always more to understand. And so, once you can embrace that, once you can embrace the idea that there may be things out there that you don't know, that empowers you to learn them and to see if they're good for you, to see if you can utilize them, to see if they fit what you want to do, and to discard them if they don't.
Would you, or what would you, somebody listening is in that position, and they have the confidence, they've been writing, they're not necessarily selling yet, and even if they are, there's always room to learn more.
Absolutely.
How would you suggest people get started?
On learning stuff or on writing or what?
Learning stuff and honing their craft.
Yeah, that's very tricky, because, not everything is for everybody. Not every class is for everybody. Not every writing approach is for everybody. And not only that, but not every teacher, not every critique partner is for everybody. I might give somebody a great critique and give somebody else a terrible critique, just because I'm not the right set of eyes or whatever it is. I'm not the right communication. And on top of that, there are just some bad people who are predatory and take advantage of people. There are classes out there that are not good, that they just want your money. There are schools, there are all kinds of bad things. There are people who will make you feel bad about writing. And so I think on the one hand, you just have to take the risk and put yourself out there and try to learn stuff, try to talk to different people. I ended up going to Odyssey because I talked to a ton of people. I looked up a ton of programs, and I really loved it. I mean, for me, it was amazing. but not everyone in my class got the same things out of it. And it definitely wasn't for everybody. And some of that is the person and some of that is the program. But I think at the end of the day, if you don't try stuff, if you don't put yourself out there, then you don't get anything. So I think part of it is due diligence, looking into stuff, asking questions, getting the information, whatever information you can, and knowing that not everything is going to be right for you. Knowing that, you know, even if something was amazing for one person, that doesn't mean it's going to be amazing for you, and being okay with that. Part of that is the person. Are you in the space to actually learn, or do you just want the credentials? Are you even listening? Are you letting the person's words sink in, or are you not letting them? But then part of it is also knowing, like, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe whatever tactic or style or approach somebody is teaching, maybe that's not for me, and that's okay. It's also okay to try things and to experiment. So I think on one hand, you're never going to absolutely know until you do something, until you take a class, until you join a critique group or whatever it is. You're never going to absolutely know if that is for you and if it works. And so much of that is the internal check of, am I doing my part to learn what I can, to get what I can from it, or am I putting up barriers? But then on the other hand, part of it is being okay with it not being right for you, moving on to the next thing and and then I guess the other part is doing your due diligence, whatever that means. You know, for Clarion West, Clarion and Odyssey, it means talking to students who went, it means reading articles, reading interviews, it means looking at the statistics of how many people it worked for, stuff like that. There is due diligence that you can do. And at the end of the day, it's still going to come down to taking a risk. You either do it or you don't. It's either going to work for you or it won't. And that is just how it is. There are no absolutes. There are no easy answers. There's no like, Arley taught this class and everyone said it was great. That doesn't mean it's going to be great for you. It just means all these people liked it. It's never going to be 100%. But, you know, at the same time, if you don't do stuff, then you never learn. You just have to take the risk sometimes, and you have to put yourself out there. But you can also protect yourself and stand up for yourself and know that it's okay if you are a different person from the other people who are in that group. Right. It's fine to be different. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. If it wasn't for diversity, why would we love speculative fiction?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is why the genres were caught pretty much in a rut. You can see how a story from the 30s looked like it had one way, and there were also only X many gatekeepers. And then true of the 40s, the 50s, you can read a novel or a story and get a pretty good idea of when it was written. And then somewhere in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, with editors like Judith Merrill and Harlan Ellison coming in, all of a sudden, bang, diversity. Women were being published. That was one of the first thing with Ursula K. Le Guin and Joanna Russ, and I think Pam Sargent being among the first who broke those particular barriers. Samuel R. Delany being one of the first recognized Black writers, although if people read the anthology Dark Matter, edited by the aforementioned Cherie Renee Thomas, you realize there's actually been a lot of people of color writing the genre for 40 or 50 years.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Jim, is that a lot of that has to do with visibility, who we acknowledge as being out there. Sometimes the work is out there, and people just pretend like it's not. Lisa Yazek has a lot of really cool stuff in her recent anthology, which talks about the history of women in science fiction as an example, and about how people were publishing these women, and then almost retroactively, suddenly people are trying to erase the fact that those women were being acknowledged, almost saying, oh yeah, no, let's pretend like that didn't happen. And so, you know, some of what you're talking about is true, but then some of it is also about like who we acknowledge as existing,
Yeah.
not whether or not they exist, but if we look at them and if we say they exist, and if we say, yes, this is part of what we're doing, we acknowledge this as part of the body, like Pauline Hopkins, like W.E.B. Du Bois, like all these other people.
Who are both in dark matter.
Yeah. And Cherie, you know, has been at the forefront of dealing with these things back before people were talking about it the way that they are today. So she's been doing that work for a very long time, as well as a number of other people like Nala Hopkinson. You know,
when you say that, I have to clap my hands over my heart. Nalo being one of my favorite people.
Yeah, Nalo was also doing anthologies, you know, for quite a while now, trying to give people space to write stories that are not, you know, not what certain people were talking about and acknowledging. So
yeah, I think I think Nalo has done a lot, especially bringing people into the fold now and helping establish new writers. I think Dark Matter. Sure, he has a new book out, Africa Risen, but Dark Matter, I think, unveiled what had already been hiding in plain sight. Where I was reading these stories that I'd read before, I just didn't know that the author was a person of color, and I didn't know that Du Bois ever wrote science fiction, which he absolutely did.
yeah.
And that's what I think the book Dark Matter did.
Yeah, I was looking a year ago or so at the Retro Hugos and at the fact that they're all white people. And I was looking at the fact that a lot of them are being, the Retro Hugos are celebrating a lot of bigoted white authors during an era when, you know, we had segregation and all kinds of other problems. So it really made me think, you know, I have no doubt that there were authors of color at that time who, you know, probably had an interest, if not actively wrote speculative fiction. But the question is, how many layers of challenges they would have had just to get published, let alone be acknowledged by, you know, the speculative community, such as it was.
Yeah.
And so part of what rankles me about things like that is just thinking about, you know, in an era of segregation and outright racism, and people basically treating other people as less than human, what that means to celebrate those authors and to actively, you know, pretend like nobody else wanted to do it, let alone did it. And I really wonder, because we have a long history of overlooking people or actively ignoring people, I really wonder who was around in that day that maybe we should have been celebrating, and that, you know, to this day we may not know they exist, or their work may exist out there, but nobody is digging them up the way that people are digging up, you know, a lot of these other authors.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I think Cherie helped change, is that she uncovered people who we didn't know were there. They were in the cracks, but they were publishing. They were doing stuff. What was being submitted and what was going absolutely nowhere is, well, that's, you know, the story of America in so many ways. And one has to bless the people that kept at it long enough to break through and end up being published. Uh, like, yeah, you know, and we mentioned Delaney and Octavia Butler, obviously, and uh, for women, we mentioned several of those earlier. There were, and there were also a lot of women writing secretly. You could always tell when you would see two initials and then a name. There was this writer who ended up with a story in Playboy, UK Le Guin. And well, without much of a bio in there, she found out when the damn thing was published, and many other people. Henry Kuttner collaborated with C.L. Moore, Catherine Moore, his wife, and there was a lot of that going on, of not quite pseudonyms, but hiding the clarity of who these people were. And now, only in the last 10 years, and I think this is something that largely Neil Clark and also John Joseph Adams have to answer for, we're getting Asian science fiction, speculative fiction. And some of it is even hitting big time in media. The Three Body Problem is being made, I think it's the second time. The first production wasn't very good, so it's being made again in a big budget movie. I think they figured out, oh, this could be a franchise. Yes, it can. But that's beside the point. These stories are now being told. People like Ken Liu are involved in helping find translators, as well as doing translation himself. So there's still a lot of barriers to be broken, but I think the conversation at long last is happening. Fingers crossed, everybody. But Clark's World, I think they publish an Asian speculative fiction story in every issue, unless I'm mistaken. And John Joseph Adams, in what is now Adamant Press, puts a good deal in there. And we had an entire issue of nothing but Asian SF. I'm trying to remember which magazine. It was before fantasy was around as a magazine. But so it might have been Nightmare, might have been Lightspeed, might have been both. We did specials. There was Women Destroy Science Fiction, because there was an idiot blogger who said just that. Only he meant it. So we put out an issue of Women Destroy Science Fiction and Women Destroy Horror for Nightmare Magazine. And then we did Queers Destroy Science Fiction, and so on and so forth. I will say there are people who do not necessarily belong to some of these identity groups who did their best. Theodore Sturgeon wrote, yes, somebody on Facebook has just mentioned, don't forget Strange Horizons, Samovar, Sophia Samovar. Everybody read her. Definitely read her.
Samovar is the sister publication, or I should say sibling publication.
Oh,
Strange Horizons. They focus on work in translation. They'll do like an English version as well as an original language version a lot of times. So it's a really good venue for finding works that are not originally in English or that are in English from other countries.
Yeah,
there's also Correo. There, Strange Horizons has been doing a lot of stuff with both international and diverse fiction, inclusive fiction. A lot of people have recently, but Strange Horizons has been doing it for a really long time.
And I don't get to read it regularly. Too many. I also have a lot of pokers in the fire, as it were. Unfortunately, almost every last one I do is unpaid work. So
it's the name of the game.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. There is a trade-off. Even people, especially people writing short stories, You'll work on a story for I don't know how long, 4 months, 5 months, and you sell it, and there's a whole $200 coming your way for that 4 or 5 months work, if you're lucky. Some of them not as good. Depends. There isn't a big market in terms of people paying for short fiction. But so thank you, Facebook user, and thank you, Arley, for educating me on that. Now I'm gonna have to read another damn magazine.
Sophia Samatar is really nice, though.
Oh yeah.
Good people. But she is not Sophia Samovar.
No, she is not. She is not. That's a different person, and I will not take back a word about her writing.
Yeah, but yeah, what we are seeing also, I think, if we want to talk about short fiction, is a lot more cool things happening in the realm of anthologies as well. Anthologies has been a great place to see voices that were previously underrepresented or still underrepresented, different perspectives, different cultural paradigms. We've had a couple that focused on Chinese fiction. We've had a couple that focused on South Asian. We've had queer ones. We've had Native and Indigenous. I just reviewed one called Never Whistle at Night. Really cool. Unlimited Futures was really cool. Just a lot of really exciting things happening in the world of original anthologies. So I really encourage people to check some of those out and see what's going on. There was Somos and Escritos is doing cool stuff.
Because you're talking about people reading it, and absolutely, that's what I have to do. But I also have to tell listeners, start writing this stuff. Don't say, oh, I can't sell because of how people identify me. Get that out of your head. Write, submit, get an agent.
Yeah, but it's easy to say that, but I understand why people feel that.
Yeah, so it's tough.
It's more than tough. It's insidious, and it's part of systemic racism, systemic misogyny, the way that we internalize what opportunities exist for us, what we're capable of. But it's also external because there are editors out there who are extremely biased, who will read stories in the wrong way, who will miss cues, they will miss subtext. Everybody's limited, but at the same time, the fact that especially in short fiction magazines, mostly editors are white, that has an impact on what gets bought, which is part of why it's so important that we have people like Cherie in place, because at what we call the top three, there's never been a black editor as far as I know, and
Cherie is the first.
Yeah, she's the first, and so that changes things a lot, and people underestimate what that means, and they underestimate the pressure that creates. But it's super important. I'm one of the few people of color who are editors at pro magazines. There aren't that many. There's Therese Maison-Pierre at Auger Mag.
Right.
I think Correo is a pro mag as well, and they have editors of color. But a lot of the mags are still white, and a lot of them are still white dudes. And I'm half white. And so the way that so on the one hand, there's internalization. I know so many authors whose first stories were straight white male protagonists, and they'll be like a trans author of color, or a woman from Africa, for example. But there's this insidious internalization process. And on the other hand, there is actual bias and actual systemic racism at play, not only in what we believe that readership wants, but in the way that we tend to read and the way that we make purchases. And so, I'm just saying we can't underestimate the power of feeling like you don't belong, because it's such a real thing.
Oh,
But
yeah.
at the same time,
Which is
like you
why,
said, people need to just go for it.
yeah,
But
that's why I'm telling people, do it.
yeah, but at the same time,
Yeah, gird your grid for, as the Firesign Theater would say, gird your grid for a lot of disappointment. When Octavia Butler taught Clarion, one of the things that she taught to every single class, and she talked about this on my show as well, is get ready for rejection, get ready for those slips, uh, collect those rejection slips, and wear them as a badge of honor, because with any luck, someday you can look back and laugh at them.
at the same time, we cannot belittle how damaging and difficult that process is.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is. Any rejection to any writer uh, is heartbreaking. And when people think of that in terms of the identity playing a role in the rejection, it's not just heartbreaking and discouraging, it's horrible. I can't come up with a word bad enough, but the point is, if you can get through it, submit. With any luck, also, there's another level before the gatekeepers of the editors. Certain agents, literary agents, are very, very good at getting past those gatekeepers, or getting to those gatekeepers. So consider that as a way of getting through. So those people know who they are. If you have questions and want to just write somebody and ask, there are many parts of the Science Fiction Writers of America website that will give advice from professionals. Also, a very good thing at that website, Writer Beware. This has been around for almost 20 years, I think. There are a lot of agents and people who will analyze your manuscript, and they're very often scams. So check that out. What resources would you recommend, Arley?
For writers,
Yeah,
um,
or editors just getting into the field. I mean, there are a lot of assistant editors and low level jobs at publishing houses.
I have a lot of links on my website to all kinds of resources for writers. But I think SIFWA is another good starting point. And Kat Rambo has a lot of helpful links on her website as well.
I think
I
Kat
think,
Rambo, when she was the CEFWA president, was partly responsible for making sure those links got put on their website.
yeah, and a lot of times, like Odyssey has, I haven't visited the Odyssey site lately, but they usually have a lot of helpful links as well.
Yeah.
The Odyssey workshop. Yeah.
So,
There's if you guys are interested in overlooked women in science fiction, check out my interview with Lisa Yazek at Clarkesworld as well.
yeah, and also under the name Facebook user, somebody writes an article about overlooked women in science fiction by Christine Catherine Rush, and she gives a link to Christine's blog. And well, I should say it for the radio people. We're showing it on the screen, but it's cirsova.wordpress.com. Then, just start with that. And then the link, if you go there, there will be a link to further on in the site because it's a long Earl, but the last few words are Rescuing Women by Christine Trathman Rush. Rush is Rusch.
Martha Wells also had a really cool World Fantasy speech a while back about this topic. It's worth reading. You can probably find it if you Google Martha Wells World Fantasy speech.
And also, if you look up the archives for the New York Review of Science Fiction, you will see her along with one of our hosts, Amy Goldschlager, talking about that very topic. And there is no more important topic because, again, that's how things get through. And right now, there's a market. Hollywood doesn't exist at the moment, which also, by the way, is how a lot of good foreign cinema who aren't members of the people who are righteously striking, so that people are looking elsewhere to other countries and other forums for movies and literature and the like. So now's a good time to be looking for that stuff. So, with sage nodding on both Arley, Sorg, and my part, I think, yeah, any parting shots, Arley? Anything you'd like to say? And you're welcome back, by the way, anytime.
Thank you. Parting shots would be for writers. Don't let anyone decide for you that you should stop writing. That should only be your decision. Sometimes it's really hard, but you have to just keep going, and you have to do the things that you are really passionate about doing. And for readers, keep reading. Look for new voices. Look for new venues. Look for fantastic stories because there's so much out there that's happening right now that is really exciting. And Fantasy Magazine is closing. I'm very sad about it. It's very heartbreaking, but at the same time, there's a lot of cool stuff out there still to read and cool new voices. And so find those new voices that are telling awesome stories and enjoy them.
Yeah, yeah. And Clark's World, where you also participate, and John Joseph Adams' other two magazines, Nightmare and Lightspeed, at the moment are healthy. And of course, you and one of our listeners, viewers, mentioned Strange Horizons Samovar. So it's
Yep.
out there. So, support the, yeah, let me just say that. Support the small presses. Very important. Or actually, I understand from several people, they don't like being called small presses as much as independent presses.
Well, that's more of a book thing than a magazine thing.
Um, I've there are particular people who are trying to coin what forthcoming things that I can't talk about
Okay.
that want to be viewed in that manner because they want to get big distribution.
Right.
And
Well, readership isn't the same as money sometimes.
no, no, but I do the work that I do pro bono, with the exception of an honorarium that I get for editing podcasts. And it really is an honorarium, folks. But that is not a complaint. I'm doing it because I love it. This radio show been on the air for so many years. It's free. It's free for you to listen to, although you should support listener-sponsored radio. And it's sadly free for me to spend much of my week producing the shows, such as we are doing right now. So join us, listen, support the station. when we look for subscribers. And because those are all, most of those are alternate voices as well. And it's not government funded in the same way that, say, parts of NPR are. So there you have it. So again, so Arley, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We will do it again. And if you know, by the way, people to throw at me, people that I don't know about, because there's no way I can know about everything. I learn about some writers through John Joseph Adams. My partner was first asked to read at a public event and by Cherie Renee Thomas. And she's certainly looking for new voices at the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, where she also just published a story last month by my partner. So that was a nice breakthrough to get into FNSF.
Nice.
Yeah. So I am hopeful that change is slowly happening. Not fast enough, but it's starting to happen. I'm hopeful. Or the way another person put it, is this a moment or is this a movement?
Good question.
It's a great question. We don't know, but let's just hope for movement. Okay. So until we meet again, this is actually the first time we're meeting outside of email.
We've met at a con.
Have we? You do
Yep.
seem familiar. Remember, was it a ReaderCon? What was it?
It was pre-pandemic, maybe a WorldCon. I'm not sure, but
It
I
had to
remember
be
meeting.
pre-pandemic because I haven't left this house during the pandemic. I really miss ReaderCon. I'm going to possibly miss Capclave, which is another good one. I don't get out west, and I don't go to WorldCons. I get to one like every 15 years or so. Last one I went to was Millennium, PhilCon, Millennium. So Millennial PhilCon, that was it. So 22 years ago. And right now, as far as I'm concerned, pandemic ain't over. And I am of a certain age and I'm diabetic. So I stay here for the most part. I go to readings when they're outdoors, and I turned the New York Review of Science Fiction readings from a live venue into a cast like this. Generally, first Tuesday of every month, but next month, September, will be right after Worldcon and right after Labor Day. So we'll delay it by a week.
I would say if you want me to throw people at you, bring on the editors from Faya magazine and the editors from Correo.
Well, yes, for the radio show, absolutely. For the reading series, I'm looking for writers because they read their work. But if you know the people at Correo and I'm sorry, you just said
Faya.
Faya, absolutely. FIYAH exclamation point is how you spell it. People who know better don't know how to say it. But that's a bit of an in-joke referring to a WorldCon a few years ago where it was badly mispronounced. Yeah, I'd be very, very happy to meet those folk and give them some radio or help them give us some radio. So if you can get me in touch with those folk, that would be great.
Sure.
Appreciate it. And I know the listeners will too. Okay, so again, Arley Sorg, ARLEY SORG, and added .com to that. and you will find yourself at a website with a lot of valuable links. And I'd like to thank the people who have been, I should put some of these on the screen like that. Lady Barbie doll, really? I haven't seen that movie yet. I don't go into places that are crowded, even though it's what, $4 this weekend?
Yep, tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, tomorrow, just tomorrow. And I still won't go. I won't. It'll be extra crowded. So find me some midnight showings. And there probably are some. Be there. So again, look for Arley's articles, reviews, all the work he is doing. Consider attending a workshop that he is involved in. They're not easy to get into, and then they're not cheap necessarily. I was accepted for Clarion, but going somewhere for 6 weeks, going from the East Coast to the West Coast for 6 weeks was not in the cards for me. So for the 5th time, thank you. I'll start putting up, covers of fantasy magazine and the like.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So take care. Don't go away, even though I'm going to take
Okay.
you. Okay. Yeah. And let me just tell people you can find us online in the Facebook group, Hour of the Wolf, on the radio, wbai.org, and join in. Thank you.